Good evening and welcome everyone to the Interfaith Youth Mayoral Town Hall. And my name is Minister Onleilove Alston from the Interfaith Center of New York. And we are so pleased to have you all with us tonight. This Interfaith Youth Mayoral Town Hall is hosted by the Elections, Politics, and Governance Club, EPG of SAR High School. Also hosted by Bishop Lachlan Memorial High School, the American Jewish Committee, the Interfaith Center of New York, and we are so excited to also have the support of Jews for Justice, Holocaust Genocide and Interfaith Education Center, and the Muslim American Leadership Alliance. So I also want to just give a special, huge thanks to Eitan Sanger and Tyler Fischman of the EPG Club for their vision and leadership concerning this whole process. I want to give a special shout out to all the young people who joined them on this journey to draft questions, to plan, to recruit sponsors, to hit people up on Twitter. I was contacted on Twitter and to reach out to candidates. I also want to thank Dr. Schwartz for all of her support with us as the faculty advisor of SAR High School. And I want to thank all the parents and classmates. We also want to thank all the candidates who will be with us tonight. Tonight is a critical moment in our city because the youth who help plan and lead this candidates forum are diverse racially, religious-wise, class-wise. They're from all areas of the city, but they wanted to come together and unite to cast their vision for the future of this city. And this election year is a very critical election year that will decide the next decade of our city. And at a time when our country and world is so divided, I have so much hope seeing young people come together across boundaries to do good in our city. And since they are the future of New York City, I am excited about the future of our beloved city because it will indeed be in their hands. And I'm saving my support for Tyler and Eitan 2030 or whenever you will run. I hope you will run. But we have an exciting night that will be filled with unique questions that really hit at the heart of the issues that are on the minds of our young people. And so I turn it over to our MC for tonight, and I ask that everyone take notes because the issues that you will hear about are very critical. Good night.
Minister Alston, thank you so much for your kind words as well as your tireless efforts towards making this evening a reality. I am Tyler Fischman, and I'm a junior at SAR High School in the Bronx. And along with Eitan Sanger, also a junior at SAR High School, I will be your moderator for this evening's event. Thank you so much for joining us. Tonight, we have with us 6 of the leading candidates for mayor of New York City: Art Chang, Andrew Yang, Kathryn Garcia, Ray Mcguire, Scott Stringer, and Eric Adams. They will field questions from diverse interfaith students from throughout the 5 boroughs. These questions concern religious life in New York City, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the future of our great city. We will be conducting individual segments with each of the candidates. The candidates will have 15 minutes each to respond to questions from the interfaith students and later the audience. If you have a question you'd like to ask, please submit it to Dr. Rivka Schwartz in the chat. We are so grateful to all of our partnering organizations and schools. In attendance, we have students from SAR High School, the Razi School and Islamic Day School in Queens, Bishop Lachlan Memorial, a Catholic school in Brooklyn, St. Jean Baptiste, a Catholic school in Manhattan, in addition to many other amazing and incredible institutions and organizations that we could not be here today without. This election is unique and monumental for many reasons. As the city is preparing to emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic, the 2021 municipal elections will usher in an entire wave of new leadership. Also, this is the first election cycle in New York to use ranked choice voting. Now you can rank your preference of candidates, and that will be considered in determining the winner. The candidate with the most first place votes may not be the winner, but instead all preferences will be taken into account. We hope that you find this evening informative and memorable, and without further ado, on to the candidates. We will begin tonight with Art Chang. Prior to running for mayor, Art Chang started 12 small businesses and has had experience working under the administrations of 4 mayors and 2 governors. Mr. Chang also co-created NYC Votes, the company that produces those famous "I voted" stickers. Mr. Chang, thank you so much for joining us. You're still muted.
Well, I'm so delighted and honored to be here. So thank you so much for asking me to participate.
Our first question tonight comes from Renaya. Renaya, take it away.
Hello, candidate Chang. My name is Renaya Hastings, and I go to Bishop Blackman Memorial High School in Brooklyn, New York. Hate crimes have always occurred in New York City, but have become more prevalent since the pandemic. Many minority and religious groups are fearful of this increase in hate crimes and targeting of visible minorities. While some people represented at this forum tonight will feel comforted by police presence, others are uneasy with more police presence in their communities. Given that hate crimes are affecting many groups, yet each of these groups have distinct ways to combat this issue, how will you address hate crimes? Can you keep religious institutions safe while balancing the concerns about over-policing, which is at the forefront of some communities' minds?
That's a great question. Thank you so much. It is such an honor to be here with so many interfaith youth. And speaking as an Asian and feeling myself for the first time in 30 years since I moved to New York, really fearful for my safety, for the safety of my family, and for the safety of all Asians. I'll tell you, like one way that my behavior has changed as a result is that when I go into the subway now, I look for other Asians and I want to be near them to provide some kind of sense of comfort and safety. One of the things that's been so powerful to me has been the outpouring of support from all parts of the communities here, from Muslims, from Jews, from Black people. Everyone has started to come together and coalesce. And in particular, I think groups who have had decades long or centuries long experience with oppression are really in some respects the best position to be able to provide support. There is a big debate going on, as you referenced, about the role of policing in this. Now, certainly we have to keep people safe. We certainly need to be able to catch perpetrators and to be able to have just punishment, but that's not going to stop the problem, right? These are really addressing the problems after they become manifested. So we need to think differently about this, and we need to think about what are the sources of these kinds of conceptions that will lead people to have hate against particular types of people, whether it's by religious sects or by religion or by race. So we have to, I think, start differently. We have to think about the role of mental illness in some of the most violent attacks. I'm proposing an immediate implementation of 10,000 beds of supportive housing to get the mentally ill homeless in treatment. I'm also in full support of changes to the school curriculum. There's a proposal to have Asian history taught in schools. But I think, we need to think more holistically about this. How do we actually think about incorporating the history of the people of New York City together, right, in the history curriculums within the schools, and then to include parents and families in these conversations as well. We are going to need some kind of, nonviolent, interrupter system as we move away from armed intervention to unarmed intervention. So I think that it's going to take some time to get there, but I'm very, very confident that we'll do that. But we'll do it all together, working collaboratively with all the folks in this room.
Thank you, Mr. Chang, for that answer. And our next question is going to come from Fuad. And Fuad, please introduce yourself and ask your question.
Oh, hello, Art Chang. My name is Fuad Farouk, and I go to Columbia University where I'm studying epidemiology. COVID-19 has had an enormous impact on our city. This is especially in regards to the restrictions surrounding how many of us can gather to practice our faiths at the houses of worship which we go to, and these ultimately play a big role in our lives as religious youth. This has had an effect on businesses, on schools, and on mental health of those who rely on these community resources. And as the city starts to open back up, how do you plan to help schools, businesses, and houses of worship recover?
Vaccination is going to be the number one thing, right? That we have to do. We have to get as many people in the city vaccinated as quickly as possible, so that we have some level of assurance that when you gather together, that it will be safe. I believe in science. I believe that the CDC is at this point the most authoritative source for recommendations regarding the science, and I believe that we should follow those as much as possible. This is going to continue to disrupt certain types of gatherings, especially indoor gatherings. But I think it's prudent. I think it's prudent to think about, the small sacrifices we might have to make on a short-term basis in order to protect the greater good.
Our next question will come from Zach. So Zach, if you could quickly introduce yourself and ask your question.
Okay, thank you. I'm Candid Chang. Hello. My name is Isaac Halker. I go to SAR High School in the Bronx. So students who will be starting high school this year will be eligible to vote when you run for re-election. Where do you want the city to be when they graduate from high school? And how will you, if elected as the next mayor of New York City, listen to and advocate for all of New York City's young people, including those from communities who are sometimes overlooked?
That's another great question. So in 4 years from now, you all will be 21, 22 years old. You'll be emerging into the workforce. You'll be thinking about potentially where you live. Maybe you're looking further into the future, into things like having a family. New York has to be a place where, by that point, where we have solved the eviction crisis, we have kept people in their homes, we have put small businesses on solid footing, kept them in their stores and in their offices, that when we think about going back to school, we need to do it with a sense of all the loss that has happened so far, and enable students to come back at a place that actually meets them where they are. And here's what I mean by that. Right now, because of COVID, because of the learning differences that people have been experiencing, the lack of broadband, the already pre-existing IEPs that 30% of New York students have, we already have a system that is where all the students are different. And I envision that actually we'll be able to treat every student have a system where it meets every student where they are, and where the students do not have to adapt as much. I believe that we're going to have a system where high school students will be able to have a much more seamless integration into college. That workforce development will begin in high school. That for college, and that will run through college. There's a great article today in the Wall Street Journal about the fact that there were over 25,000 technology jobs posted last year. Well, there are 250,000 students at CUNY and over 10,000 computer science major. So what do we do to actually create a more seamless pipeline between students in college and the work experiences they have here in New York City? So we can do that. I have experience doing that with CUNY, just in fact, and we created a software apprenticeship program that provided a way for students to prove that they could do the work for tech startups within the city. And I know that we can expand that in partnership with the technology companies. I also have a plan for millennials. In the next few days, we're going to be releasing the Art Chang for Mayor millennial platform. A key element of that is going to be a different way to think about student loans, because in 4 years, you're going to come out with student loan debt. And what are you going to do with that? Student loan debt is one of the biggest things that is going to prevent you from having career and life flexibility in the future. So what I know we can do is that we can think about pooling student debt from students across the city and then to be able to refinance it, create a refinancing vehicle to offer students better rates, more favorable payment terms. And then in some cases, depending upon your employment, maybe have situations where the employers actually contribute to your student loan payments. So there are lots of things that we can do. We need to create a place where you have, I envision incubators across the city, not just for technology, but for things like food and retail, and pot will be legal, and we're going to have a thriving, marijuana industry, but incubators for those entrepreneurs as well. So New York City should become the best place, and will become the best place to start a business when I'm mayor. And in the midst of all of this intersection of creativity, finance and entrepreneurship, that this should be a super bright future for you right here in New York City.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chang. And then our last question from Mr. Chang is going to be from Elizabeth. Elizabeth, please ask your question, and we have about 2 minutes until our next candidate is coming.
Okay, hi. My name's Elizabeth Andrews, and I go to Bishop Lachlan in Brooklyn, New York. The people who put together this forum come from many different communities. You have stated that your administration will meet communities where they are and will not employ a one-size-fits-all approach. What are the practical differences in how you will interact with people of different faiths and cultural backgrounds, and how will you meet them where they are?
For 8 years, we've seen an administration who makes decisions at the top and then passes those decisions down. And those decisions have very little variation. In fact, almost no variation from community to community. This has to be done very differently. And I'll give you an example, and this might, I think, very relevant to you. That's school reopening. We have a one-size-fits-all method for how the schools reopened, but if we talk to the communities and ask them, what are you ready for? What risks are you willing to undertake? Then I think we are in a position to actually begin to think about how we do things on more of a community by community basis. Why do we have to have one size fits all solutions? I believe that the next City Hall has to address every community exactly where they are. So thank you for that question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chang. And I believe we have our next candidate here. And so we're going to thank Mr. Chang for joining us tonight and to stay on. But we thank you so much for joining us. And next up, we're going to have Mr. Andrew Yang. Prior to running for mayor, Mr. Yang was a candidate for president in the 2020 Democratic primaries. Before that, Mr. Yang started Venture for America, a not-for-profit group working to help create jobs in cities that had been hit by the Great Recession. Mr. Yang, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Hey, Tom, it's great
Our
to be
first
here.
question.
It's great to be here. Hello, everyone. You're such incredible role models for everyone else. I love this group so much.
Thank you. Our first question is going to come from Amber.
Hi, Amber.
Amber, are you able to unmute?
Yes, it kept on muting me again. Good evening, Mr. Andrew Yang. I'm Amber Sampson, a current senior at St. Jean Baptiste High School in the Upper East Side and an American University commit. It's a pleasure to have you with us tonight. Across the city, minority and religious groups are fearful of a rise in hate crimes and the targeting of visible minorities. But while some people represented at this forum tonight would feel comforted by increased police presence, others are more uneasy with more police presence in their communities. Given that hate crimes are affecting many groups, yet each of these groups have different ways they want to approach this rising issue, how will you address hate crimes? Can you keep religious institutions safe while balancing the concerns about over-policing, which is at the forefront of some communities' minds?
Thank you for this question, Amber, and congratulations on heading to American in the fall. It's a great school. I had friends who went there and loved it. You reminded me of like a professional athlete or like a college recruit. It's like I'm like an American commit. Like it sounded awesome, but it is awesome. I'm going to tell you all a story that I think speaks to some of these issues that we're facing around hate crimes in New York City. And the feeling of unease is shared by everyone, regardless of age and background, though it obviously hits certain communities harder than others. Anti-Asian violence has surged by 900% from a low base. Certainly anti-Semitic incidents and incidents that affect other communities have also gone up. So here's the story I'm going to tell. I was heading to Staten Island a number of weeks ago, and a man attacked a photographer who was kind of around my party. And I went to try and help the photographer and managed to diffuse the situation. This man then became much more amicable. When the police came to him, he was not arrested, which I thought was appropriate given that he wasn't threatening anyone at that time, even though he had just shoved someone pretty violently. And then 3 weeks later or 4 weeks later, this man attacked an elderly Asian man on the subway. And I was shocked and horrified because I was like, oh my gosh, like I'd seen this very man on the Staten Island ferry and he was violent then and seemed frankly mentally ill. And then a number of weeks later attacked an elderly Asian man on the subway. So if you see an elderly Asian man get attacked on the subway, I think most of us would interpret that as a hate crime because it's very reasonable. Why else would you attack an elderly Asian man on the subway? But the gentleman in question was mentally ill. And I know this because I met him and I spent enough time with him to know this. So to the extent that religious communities are targeted by acts of hatred or violence and law enforcement is appropriate, I think that law enforcement should be acting diligently in any way that they can to protect people. But the ways that we can keep us safe, in my opinion, do involve mental health resources for people who are struggling right now, which can overlap with acts of violence that can be interpreted in different ways. And also simply getting our city back on its feet will help make our streets safer, our subway safer, and help ease some of both the fears and the violence that are now unfortunately rising in our city. So I think law enforcement does have a role to play. I certainly don't think it's feasible for law enforcement to somehow be at like every intersection where some kind of incident can arise. And so we do have to think bigger about how we can make people stronger, more resilient, and get people the help they need when there's evidence that they need it, like this gentleman I met on the Staten Island ferry this number of weeks ago.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yang. Up next, we have Nana. So Nana, take it away. Oh, up next we have Leo. Leo, take it away.
Hi, Mr. Yang. My name's Leo, and I'm a junior at Hunter College High School on the Upper East Side. So students starting high school this fall, they'll become eligible to vote if you run for re-election in 2025. So you're a candidate that's known for your vision. What's your vision of where you want this city to be after 4 years of your mayorship, and how should students, young New Yorkers, looking back in 2025, evaluate the success of your first term?
Oh, it's so fun to think about you all voting, for my potential reelection. I mean, that's like a real goal for me to aspire to. So here's my mission. Right now, our city is badly wounded, and I want to get us back on our feet within the first 2 years. And the reason I say 2 years is because our federal aid will last us approximately 2 years. And by year 3, the current projections are that the city budget will face a multi-billion-dollar deficit. So we have 2 years of federal aid to try and get our city in a condition where we get back the vast majority of the 600,000 jobs we're missing, the vast majority of the 88% of commuters and tourists that we're missing that support about half of the jobs that have been lost, that we get our streets feeling safe, that New York City still feels like the place to celebrate and come together and experience culture and sporting events and everything else. So we're going to know, frankly, whether it worked. Like, I think 4 years from now or 5 years from now, if I'm running for re-election, we'll have a very clear sense of whether our city is back or not. And that's my fundamental vision. I do have a very robust anti-poverty platform, which includes $1 billion in cash relief for those in extreme poverty. I want to help connect more people to the financial system by having, frankly, basic bank accounts, because right now it's very expensive to be poor in New York City. They're getting exploited by check cashing and money lending and even pawn shop lenders. So I have a very ambitious agenda for what we need to accomplish over the next 4 years. But it all does hinge on whether our city is healthy again, because if our city is healthy again, then we're going to be able to do great things. And if it's not healthy again, then the decisions will become more difficult.
Next up, we're going to have Kira ask her question. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Leo. Hi, Kira. How are you? I just visited your school. It was a very, very, very nice school, I have to say.
Hi, my name is Kira and I'm a junior at SAR High School in the Bronx. You have previously stated that the city has little business prescribing secular curriculums to religious schools because as mayor, you will always respect religious freedom. This comes in the face of a damning 2019 report conducted by the Department of Education on yeshiva schools in the city, which found that just 2 of the 28 schools provided adequate secular education to their students. You have also been on record opposing circumcisions, a key practice of the Jewish faith. You suggested a government mandate to inform parents of the costs, benefits, and risks of circumcision. So can you please explain where you stand on government involvement in religious matters? When is it encroachment and when is it necessary?
Thanks, Kira. I guess I'll start with the second thing first. I never suggested that the government should be playing a role in families' personal decisions where their kids are concerned. I've attended multiple brises myself. To me, that's been very, very consistent. And insofar as religious freedom for yeshiva education or other types of schools, I'm a parent. I'm a public school parent. I've got 2 boys, one of whom's in kindergarten, the other one who's autistic and in a special needs school. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate the lengths that communities and families are going to have their kids receive an education that they feel is a good fit for them. It's a lot harder to do what a lot of communities have done around yeshiva schools than frankly do what we have done, where we just try and send our kid to the local public school. So to the extent that there are problems with these schools, my approach is one of deference and partnership, where if there's an issue of deficiency in a particular school, then I would reach out to the folks involved and say, hey, I think we're all aligned. Like, we all want to see that your kids get an education that you're excited about and that meets their needs. And that's my starting point. I have a very, very deep appreciation for what communities are investing, not just in terms of resources, but time, spirit, energy. There's just so much that goes into educating children. And if a community takes that on, then I'm instinctively one that wants to defer to the work that's being done every day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yang, for that answer. Next up, we're going to have a question from Fuad again.
Hey, Fuad, how are you? I think you're muted, my friend.
All right, there we go.
That's good stuff. How are you?
I'm fine. Hello, Mr. Andrew Yang. My name is Fuad Farouk, and I go to Columbia University. I'm studying epidemiology. Go Lions.
Wow, that's incredible. Congrats.
You.
No pressure, Fuad, but I did meet my wife on Columbia's campus. So, just saying, anything can happen out there.
Thank you. Well, COVID-19 has had an enormous impact on our city. And with regards to the restrictions surrounding how many of us can gather, similar to my last question, houses of worship play a big role in our lives as religious youth. But it also has affected businesses and schools, and ultimately the mental health of all the various individuals who rely on these community resources. As the city is starting to open back up, how do you help? How do you plan to help the schools, businesses, and houses of worship not only open back up, but ultimately recover?
Thanks, Fuad. This is a situation that's unfolding before our eyes in real time. I don't know how many of you saw the announcement where Bill de Blasio said, everything's open July 1st. And then Governor Cuomo said, everything's open May 17th, I think. It's either 17th or 19th maybe. And so there's the restrictions that are based, you hope, on various public health recommendations. And I'm someone who is generally for reopening, particularly schools, which I believe can be reopened safely. And I think at least some of you have experienced some version of that. So there are certain institutions that we need to try and lead towards reopening, like schools. There are other businesses, let's call them restaurants and bars, that you hope when the restrictions are loosened that they're able to reopen in a positive way. My issue there, frankly, is that I'm not sure that a lot of them will get the customers that they require to be able to reopen successfully. And so we need to be standing at the ready to try and help some of those businesses recover. Because if you imagine, like, let's say a restaurant in the Bronx, and it's been run by a family, let's say it's been closed for a number of months, and now they're trying to make a go of it to reopen. Let's say that they fail and they decide, you know what, my customers aren't here, like I can't make money, like we're going to close. How long do we think it's going to take for some new restaurant or establishment to occupy that space? Maybe quite some time. And so what you want to do is you want to try and help that business make it through this time. So I've declared that if I win this race, we're going to have a moratorium on small business fines for a year, because the last thing we should be doing is frankly making it harder for a business to reopen. For the big institutions, like let's call them Broadway theaters, there's a lot of government aid that's actually flowing in their direction to try and help them reopen this fall. So it looks like Broadway is going to be back a little bit later this year. So Fuad, my goal is to try to get our schools, our city back open as quickly as possible, as long as, you know, frankly, it's safe to do so. And I think it's 100% appropriate for the city to be investing resources in facilitating this. The reality is that if you waited for Broadway to reopen without aid, it would never reopen. You know, Chuck Schumer did the right thing by getting the money. And to the extent that New York City is in position to help various businesses that might not be reached by federal aid, then we should do it. Like, I think that's where a lot of our federal aid should be going. We're getting, let's call it like $8 billion in federal aid this year, and helping small businesses get back on their feet, or theaters or any of these establishments, should be where some of that money goes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yang. Our next candidate will be Kathryn Garcia.
Hey, Kathryn.
Ms. Garcia.
Hey, Kathryn, it's a very tough crowd. So
Okay.
Watch out.
You warmed them up for me, right?
I am your warm-up act. Wherever you go, you can just trot me out, and then you know, like, and then I step aside. Thank you all. Have a great night. Bye, Kathryn. See you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So now we will speak to Kathryn Garcia. Ms. Garcia has 14 years of government experience and has been New York City's go-to crisis manager in the toughest of moments. During COVID-19, she created an emergency food program that has delivered 200 million meals to New Yorkers in need. Ms. Garcia served as incident commander during Hurricane Sandy and has led efforts to protect children from lead poisoning in New York City public housing. Ms. Garcia, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
So our first question comes from Kaylee. So Kaylee, take it away.
Okay, you can hear me?
I can hear you a little low.
Good evening, Ms. Garcia. My name is Kaylee Flambert, and I attend Bishop Loughlin Memorial High School in downtown Brooklyn. Across the city, minority and religious groups are fearful of a rise in hate crimes and the targeting of visible minorities. But while some groups represented at this forum tonight would feel comforted by increased police presence, others are uneasy. Given that hate crimes are affecting many groups, each of the groups have different ways they want to approach the rising issue. How will you address these hate crimes? Can you keep religious institutions safe while balancing the concerns about over-policing, which is at the forefront of some communities' minds?
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. By the way, my brother did attend Bishop Loughlin for a short time. He didn't actually graduate from there, but tough school. But when I'm mayor, we need to have both neighborhood policing as well as ensuring that the hate crimes division is fully funded and up and running. But it's more than that. It's about eyes on the street, but it's also about making sure that we know where it's happening, that we are getting full reports, that we are also embedding into our curriculum everything that makes all of the different parts of our diversity phenomenal, to talk about often what everyone has contributed to making this a great city. But when I'm mayor, we need to ensure that everyone is safe, regardless of the color of their skin or regardless of the neighborhood. We cannot allow people to be targeted. We have to stand up every time it happens, but we do need police on the ground. But I feel very strongly that it has to be respectful, because I was adopted and my brother and my sister were adopted, and they are Black, and I have seen the power of diversity at my dinner table, but I have also seen when people are treated without respect because of the color of their skin. We do need to have police on the beat, but we can have police that are respectful. And when I was sanitation commissioner, I had a police force that carried guns. They did their job with respect to the community.
Thank you so much, Ms. Garcia. Our next question concerns the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Please take it away.
Hi, Ms. Garcia. My name is Camila Castrillon, and I go to St. Jean Baptiste High School in Manhattan. Our city has a combination of both enormous financial needs due to the COVID-19 crisis and a big budget shortfall. Where are you going to get the money to enact your priorities in revitalizing the city? Would you consider shifting any money away from the police department to pay for other services such as education, affordable housing, and food security?
So that's a wonderful question. We are getting a tremendous amount of money from both the state and the federal government. Our budget actually will be higher than it was pre-COVID due to this influx of money. We need to make sure we're spending it wisely and doing the hard work about reinvesting in our communities, making sure that kids are getting an education and are back in school. That needs to happen yesterday, that we are putting art and music and sports back in our schools, because we need to engage with kids on every level. We have to have fundamental city services work. That means kids go to school, the garbage gets picked up, and people feel safe in their community. When I'm mayor, one of the places I'm going to take money out of is $130 million out of headquarters at the Department of Education and move it back into classrooms where it belongs, where principals should drive the education of their kids and get held accountable for it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Garcia, for that answer. I think next up, we're going to have Elviden.
Hi, Mrs. Garcia. My name is Elviden Sirkovic. I'm a proud Balkan Muslim, and I'm a freshman attending at Raleigh School in Woodstead, New York. Students who will be starting high school this year will be eligible to vote when you run for re-election. In what stages do you want the city to be when our high schoolers are in their graduate year? How should New Yorkers look back in 2025, evaluate the success of your first team? Youth these days are very interested in finding ways to and how will you, if elected as the next mayor of New York City, listen to and advocate for all of NYC's young people, including those from communities which are sometimes overlooked?
Oh, thank you for that question. Are you in a car? Sorry, I was getting distracted. When we look back on my first 4 years as mayor, we will see that the economy has come back strongly, that we have supported our small businesses, that we will be working collaboratively with our nonprofit sector, with our faith-based sector, and with our private sector to bring everyone's talents to the table, that people do feel safe in their communities, that there has been a radical transformation, that we are educating people for 21st century jobs, that they can thrive in the future, whether or not that's food or fashion or finance, that they have real opportunity regardless of their zip code. and that we have a greener city where our health is better because we have put in place the investments to both combat climate change, but also combat air quality problems. And then you'll vote for me.
Thank you so much, Ms. Garcia. Up next, we have Leona. So Leona, take it away.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Leona Tetton. I'm an observant Jew, and I'm a sophomore at the Bronx High School of Science in the Bronx. So as COVID-19 food czar, you are responsible for providing meals to the city's residents during the pandemic. However, the city's programs fell short and continue to fall short in providing for Jews and Muslims who observe their religion's dietary codes. Thankfully, there are both kosher and halal soup kitchens and food pantries that exist in New York City, but they're few and far apart compared to normal ones. How will you tackle this issue and ensure that all of New York City's Jewish and Muslim residents have equal access to emergency food?
Food is such a critical part of what we need as humans, and it needs to make sure that we are meeting the dietary needs of people. When I was food czar, you could choose halal or kosher food and have it delivered to your house. We also did halal at schools across the city with distribution, as well as kosher, because it is imperative that people have food that they are going to eat. Delivering food that you will not eat is just wasteful. We have to be supportive of the entire food industry, though. We need to expand SNAP across the city so that we leave so much money on the table for people who are eligible for SNAP, which is food stamps. This means you can go buy your own food. It should be allowed to be used for delivery. It should be allowed to be used for hot food. We need to support our food pantries. We have a very strong network. They're just not geographically near everyone. And put pop-up pantries in those locations where we don't have a nonprofit already serving that community. We did this during COVID with Grow NYC and had them come into communities where there were not food pantries and do, in partnership with nonprofits, food distribution out of them. When I'm mayor, I will ensure that every single community in the city is getting the food that they need because it's just an imperative.
Thank you so much, Ms. Garcia. Let's see. And is Rabbi Bloom, do we have our next candidate, or should we continue for 3 more minutes?
Continue.
Ms. Garcia, I'm going to ask you a question that came in from the audience. My name is Rivka Press-Schwartz. I have the honor of serving as the faculty advisor to the EPG club at SAR High School and working for these two impressive young men. So a question that came in from the audience is there was a recent rash of vandalism attacks on synagogues in the Riverdale neighborhood in which our school is located. And the alleged perpetrator of these attacks was arrested. And then under New York City's new law governing cash bail, he was released without cash bail. And so a member of our audience wants to know what you think about that specific case and more broadly, what you think about the new cash bail law.
The rise in hate crime, both anti-Semitism as well as anti-Asian, it's up like 200% in the city of New York, has got to be stopped, has got to be nipped in the bud. We need to have the police solving these crimes and getting people off the street who are committing them. Cash bail at the state, when the state passed, I have supported, because you should be innocent until proven guilty. But that does not mean that you get to go and commit other acts of vandalism or threaten a community. They need to be held to the highest standard of the law and prosecuted on a fast track so that they are not out committing any other acts against any communities. That is my approach to it.
Thank you so much. We have 2 more questions coming in from different members of the listening population and coming at the same issue from rather different orientations. One of our students asked if you would return to the tough on crime policies from the Giuliani era as we see crime in New York City rising now. And another one of our listeners asked if you would support defunding the police. So 2 questions about.
So different parts of the spectrum. It's New York City.
Perspectives on the question. So you can address both of them together. Thank you.
I reject the choice out of hand. We can have a police force that is effective against crime and respectful of communities. We need to hire cops that are older, that are 25. They need to live in the city. We have to train our sergeants and our lieutenants in de-escalation so that they can make sure that that is happening with folks on when they are walking out the door to go on patrol. We need to promote, and there's a huge number of people retiring. There's a real opportunity. Promote people who do engage with community, who are doing that. So we're not just promoting based on how many arrests, but we are measuring your community impact. And that drives down crime. When you are engaged with community, it drives down crime. But we do need to make sure that there are community police out in the field, that they are walking the beat. We do have to be extremely aggressive against gun violence and stop the flow of guns into the city. We do have to hold people accountable for hate crimes. We cannot be a city where, based on the color of your skin or how people are viewing you as racial or religious minority, that you get attacked. My approach is you have to be tough but fair. We have to have an effective police force. We have to have a police force that is engaged with community and that is doing the tough work to make it so that we are all safe regardless of the color of our skin.
I think, do we have Ray here? Okay, so thank you so much, Ms. Garcia, for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
We really appreciate hearing your answers. And then next up, we're going to have Mr. Ray Mcguire. I think, Mr. Mcguire, could you, there we go.
Hey, Ray. You're on mute, Ray. Take care.
So I'm just going to introduce Mr. Mcguire. So over the last 36 years, Mr. Mcguire has led businesses responsible for generating over $20 billion a year in revenue, supporting public and private sector clients around the world. He recruited and built teams to do multi-billion-dollar deals, and he advised the CEOs of companies on how to help the businesses grow and prosper. For the last 13 years, Mcguire was the head of global corporate and investment banking at Citigroup and the longest tenure head of investment banking in the history of Wall Street. Ray, through his time in all these different ventures, has helped his firms improve the lives of people in low-income communities. Throughout his career, Mr. Mcguire has also served as a mentor to corporate and civic leaders in New York. Mr. Mcguire, we thank you so much for joining us tonight and giving us your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. How are you doing today?
We're doing great. And then our first question, I think, is going to be from Amira.
Hi, Amira. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you so much.
Great to see you involved. It's so important. Thank you for stepping up.
Yeah, anytime. So, hi, as introduced before, my name is Amira Ismail. I'm a Muslim and a freshman at Razi School, which is located in Queens. Across the city, minority and religious groups are fearful of a rise in hate crimes and targeting visible minorities. When my friends and I walk to school in our hijabs, we are fearful that we will experience a hate crime. Some people represented at this forum tonight would feel comforted by increased police presence. Others are uneasy with the more police presence in their communities. Given that hate crimes are affecting many groups, yet each of the groups have different ways they want to approach the rising issues, how will you address hate crimes while respecting each community's wants and needs? Can you keep religious institutions safe while balancing the concerns about over-policing, which is at the forefront of some communities' thoughts?
So, Amira, thank you for that. As a, it's deeply personal to me, given that I'm a 6'4", 200-pound black man, and understand the implications of that, and have been on the other side of anti or racial kinds of conscious and unconscious bias. So I know what it's like. I've lived this, and I probably live it every day, Amira. So my view about this is that hatred in any form, as the great Martin Luther King Jr. told us, informed by Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, says that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So at every instance, we need to denounce hatred. We need to step in. We need to identify that for which we stand and be unrelenting in our stand. And so when I see any instances of anti-Semitism, anti-Asian, any kind of racial or religious hatred, for my entire life, I've made certain that I stood against that, and I'm known for doing just that. I fully respect the need to make sure that we have a balance. I want better policing. I am not for defund. I want to make sure that the police are respectful, accountable, and proportionate in their response. My structure for NYPD is accountability, to make certain that I'm ultimately the one who's accountable, but I have a structure which you can see at rayformayor.com that includes the appointment of a deputy mayor for public safety who's involved in the community, who's responsible for the day-to-day management of the NYPD. It has to do with holding chain of command responsible. It has to do with the appointment of emergency social services, 24 hours, 7 days a week, a corps that goes in to help those who are mentally challenged, who can go with the police or who can go ahead of the police, but it's an entire way to look at policing. So we balance the needs of the community and the respect that's necessary between the police and the community. Invest in community organizations, invest in the violence interrupters. Let's return safety and justice to our streets, which is my plan for safety and justice. So I appreciate exactly what you've said and the experiences that your friends and you have. I've encountered those experiences in my educational life. I know what it's like. I've encountered them in my adult life. We need to redress them and denounce them at every step of the way.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mcguire. Up next, we have Kira. So Kira, take it away.
Hi, Kira.
Hi, my name is Kira and I go to SAR High School in the Bronx. Our city has had a combination of both enormous financial needs due to the COVID-19 crisis and a big budget shortfall. Where are you going to get the money to enact your priorities? Would you consider shifting money away from the police department to pay for other services?
First of all, Kira, if you look at what we've been handed now from the federal government, we've been handed an enormous sum of money. Before this, I had a plan which is called my greatest, most inclusive economic comeback plan. And now with the $15 billion that we're getting from the federal government, I know how to make this work. So my plan is called the greatest, most inclusive economic comeback plan. And with my plan, we were facing a $4 billion budget deficit. I had a plan to grow our way out of, to grow us out of this. We can neither tax nor cut our way out of this. So I have a plan that is in place that allows us to pay for the expansion of the jobs, 500,000 jobs, go big, go small, go forward, creation of 500,000 jobs, and focusing on our small businesses, 50,000 jobs in small businesses, where small businesses are the lifeblood of the city. Half of the jobs in New York City are small businesses. They're also integral to our neighborhoods. And so my plan is to take care of half the wages for these small businesses for 1 year, help them retain New York City sales tax receipts for 1 year, waive all fees for 1 year, appoint a deputy mayor for small businesses to make sure that the bureaucracy that many of our small businesses encounter, we cut through the bureaucracy and invest $100 million or so into making certain into my comeback bank so they can give grants and give equity to the small businesses to help them flourish. And my deputy mayor for small businesses is going to make sure that we have a concierge service so the small businesses know that they're welcome here and that I'm an advocate for small businesses. We need the small businesses. My recovery, my comeback plan is specifically designed to make sure that businesses come back and that we meet the deficit and we overcome the deficit.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mcguire. Up next, we have Madison. Madison, take it away.
Hi, Madison.
Hi, Mr. Mcguire. How are you?
How are you, Madison?
Great. So as said, I'm Madison Broadus and I go to Bishop Lachlan Memorial High School in Brooklyn, New York. Students who will be starting high school this year will be eligible to vote when you run for re-election. Where do you want the city to be when they graduate from high school? How should New Yorkers look back in 2025 and evaluate the success of your first term? And how will you, if elected as the next mayor of New York City, listen to and advocate for all of New York City's young people, including those from communities which are sometimes overlooked?
So Madison, I so appreciate and respect the question. We have 3 children. New York has been great to me. We have 3 children. We have Leah, who is 8, Ella, who's 18, who's just finishing high school, and she's been able to get into a college of her choice, of which we're very proud. And our son Cole, who is 20, who was drafted first round into the NBA, and now the starting point guard for the Orlando Magic, and just a couple of nights ago hit the game-winning shot at the end of the game. So we're quite proud of our children and what we want for our children. And one of the things for which I am so looking forward to changing is the opportunity that our children have. The legacy that I would look forward to is education, making certain that our children's lives are not determined by their zip code. So to get the education that you've been fortunate to get, that's got to be key. So it's going to be an educational system that allows our children to get the opportunities. It's going to be making certain that our streets are safe, that you feel safe, you and your colleagues feel safe going down the street or up the street at any hour of the day and night. And it's making certain that I had economic inclusion, economic justice. I got no economic justice, I got no social justice. So I have to focus on the economy. And if I look back in 2025, and that which you all should look to is say that he was a great steward for our future, that he invested in us, and he invested in children who are like us, because that's who he is, and that's the life that he led. My mother was a single mother. I didn't know my dad, and she was the one who at one point worked 3 jobs, and she became a social worker. So I know what it's like not to have, and I know what it's like to have to go perform the way you're performing when you're given the opportunity to do that. So the legacy's got to be one of making sure that the economy works for all New Yorkers in a way that today it doesn't, making certain that our streets are safe and that they're just, and making certain that we have the highest quality education that exists anywhere so that our lives are not determined by our zip codes.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Mcguire, for joining us tonight. We really appreciate hearing from you. And I think next up we have Mr. Borough President Eric Adams.
Thank you.
Sorry, I think we have Heba here to ask a question.
Yeah, we have one more question, Eitan.
Sorry. Yeah, Mr. Mcguire, I think you have time for one more, right?
For me, Ray Mcguire, yes, I have time for one more.
Sorry about that, my mistake.
Hi, how are you?
How are you?
My name is Hiba Lamari. I attend Manhattan College, and I have attended Andalusia High School, which is an Islamic private institution. And just like many other private schools and privately owned businesses, it was affected financially by the pandemic, which led to letting go most of the teachers, who most of them were the main income in their households. You proposed a comeback job or job accelerator designed to help small businesses and get 50,000 people back to work by covering 50% of the worker's salary for 1 year at a small business that were hardest hit by the pandemic. While small businesses were impacted by the pandemic, some of the hardest hit institutions are the 501c3 nonprofit and religious organizations that are the lifeblood of our communities. These organizations also help employ thousands of people. Would the comeback job accelerator apply to the 501c3s and more general, or like, how do you plan on helping these institutions?
You know, Hiba, I've been involved in in the not-for-profits for the past 30 years. And you talk about education. I'll point you to one is De La Salle Academy, run by a LaSallian brother Brian Carty, and I've been the chair of that board for a number of years. It is for gifted inner city kids, many of whom are below the poverty line from 6th to 8th grade. So I know the challenges of having a 501c3, especially the challenges of having a 501c3 that's focused on education. The other is a school called George Jackson Academy. I was there at the beginning. George Jackson was a classmate of mine who passed away early. And this is a school for Black and brown boys, high school boys or Black and brown boys who want the same kind of educational opportunities that I had. And that's what this is all about. So the answer is we need to make the funds available through not only through the resources of the comeback plan, investing in those organizations, the 501c3s, that provide the kind of education to which you have referred, and make sure that we involve the private sector, because the private sector in many ways has been the lifeblood to many of these 501c3s. And since I've been involved in the private sector in so many 501c3s, in education, in healthcare, in the criminal justice system, and in the art world and arts and culture, where I've been integrally involved for the past 30 years, making certain that I could support those 501c3s, they are critical to what takes place in this city. So I would be the biggest advocate for the 501c3s and a huge advocate for the 501c3s, especially the ones that focus on education. The only way I got here is through education. The only way that many of us will get out is through education. So if there's anyone who's focused on this, it's me. And I got a track record, and as you all would say, I get receipts.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Mcguire. Now we will have Mr. Eric Adams. Sorry about that before. Mr. Eric Adams is the borough president of Brooklyn. He previously served in the New York State Legislature and was previously in the New York City Police Department. Mr. Adams, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And our first question is going to come from Renaya.
Hi, candidate Adams. My name is Renaya Hastings, and I'm a sophomore at Bishop Lachlan Memorial High School. Hate crimes have always occurred in New York City, but have become more prevalent since the pandemic. Many minority and religious groups are fearful of this increase in hate crimes and targeting of visible minorities. While some people represented at this forum tonight will feel comforted by increased police presence, others are uneasy with more police presence in their communities. Given that hate crimes are affecting many groups, yet each of these groups have distinct ways to combat the issue, how will you address hate crimes? Can you keep religious institutions safe while balancing the concerns about over-policing, which is at the forefront of some communities' minds?
Thank you so much. Shalom, Nihai, Buenas noches, Barigari, and for all others, what's up? Good to see you all. Nice to be here. So think about this for a moment. While you are getting to the place of the city we want, we have to deal with the imminent threats that we are faced with. We can't be so idealistic that we're not realistic. And there's a proper combination of thoughtful, well-informed, sensitive public safety and changing the ecosystem of public safety, that police is not the primary part of it, but is one of the components of it. But at the same time, making sure we move to a long-term place where we don't have to have these hate crimes. How do we do it? By being honest with ourselves. We are in a segregated city and society. I started something 2 years ago called Breaking Bread, Building Bonds. 100 dinners throughout the entire city. And at each dinner, 10 people, all of them come from different backgrounds. No two people could come from the same ethnicity, culture, or background. And you know what we did? We did something revolutionary. We talked to each other. So the reason we're seeing hate crimes, because we have a hateful city. We live next door to someone that is a different ethnicity or culture. We don't even say good morning to each other. We don't even look at each other in the eyes. We don't even understand why does someone wears a yarmulke or kufi, why someone says salam alaikum, why someone wears a dashiki. We need to start building into our school systems an intentional way to ensure that we are coming from an asset-based education. You walk into my classroom and you're wearing a yarmulke, that should be a class course, having you understand the history of what it's about. You wearing a kippah, let's talk about it. You wearing a hijab, let's explain that. But we do just the opposite. We try to deny our diversity and act like we don't recognize it. I say no to that. Let's be open to embracing the diversity of our city. And trust me when I tell you, you'll see hate crimes decrease and you'll see tolerance and acceptance increase. But there's no shortcuts to this. And there's no policing just to this. There is a response that all of us must do. But those who carry out intentional hate crime, we do need to make sure that they are arrested. We need to look at those restorative justice. But those who are taking lives and seriously injuring people, they need to be held accountable. So it's a combination, not a one size fits all. We don't have to be hard on people who want public safety or want a policing approach. And we don't have to be hard on people who want a more proactive approach to this issue.
Thank you so much, Mr. Adams. Up next, we have Kaylee. So Kaylee, please take it away.
Good evening, Mr. Adams. My name is Kaylee Flambert, and I am a sophomore at Bishop Lachlan Memorial High School in Brooklyn. COVID-19 has had an enormous impact on our city. With regards to restrictions surrounding how many of us can gather to practice our faith at our homes, at our houses of worship, which play a big role in our lives as religious youth. This has had an effect on businesses and on schools, and on the mental health of those who rely on these community resources. As the city starts to open back up, how do you plan to help the schools, businesses, and houses of worship recover?
Well, I led the charge to get our houses of worship open. It made no sense that you can open a liquor store, but you can't open a church, a mosque, a synagogue, a temple, and other places where we were going to really reconnect ourselves in our spiritual base. You know, I think just as we have a physical presence, I believe we have a spiritual anatomy as well. And, you know, we feed our bodies with broccoli and kale, but our spiritual anatomy must be fed with some of the spiritual connections that we're missing. And government did not understand that. And so as we transition to reopening our city, we need to make sure that we transition to give the support that's needed, both financially and emotionally. We have witnessed an uptick in suicides among students. The trauma that sociologists are continually to talk about, not being in the atmosphere around your friends, your associates, being able to socialize, being inside all the time. It's having a major impact on all of us. And let me tell you something. All of us are going to live through trauma through our lifetimes. My parents lived through Pearl Harbor and the Great Depression. Some of your parents may have lived through, and I lived through 9/11. Now you are the COVID generation, and each one of us are going to experience this. And if we identify those traumas and those uncertainties and make sure we give each other the most emotional and financial support to cycle through it, we'll come through it together. And that's what the role of government is. We must be there to give the emotional support, identify it, and not just embrace the concept of, you know what, just suck it up as part of life. No, it's not part of life. We need to support each other as we navigate through this moment. And that's what I'm going to do as the mayor. I'm going to ensure that we have that necessary support to get through this.
Thank you so much, Mr. Adams. Leona, go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Adams. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Leona Tedden. I'm an observant Jew, and I'm a sophomore at the Bronx High School of Science. And students who will be starting high school this year and all the students who will be graduating in the next few years will be eligible to vote when you run for re-election. Where do you want this city to be when they and I and a lot of the students here graduate from high school? How should New Yorkers looking back in 2025 evaluate the success of your first term? And how will you, if elected as the next mayor of New York City, listen to and advocate for all of New York City's young people, including those from communities which are sometimes overlooked?
Well, first, what I want to do, we have betrayed New Yorkers. Archbishop Desmond Tutu has a quote. We spend a lifetime pulling people out of the river. No one goes upstream and prevent them from falling in the first place. We have professionalized hanging out downstream and pulling people out of the river of homelessness, unemployment, incarceration, crime, violence, healthcare crises. I want you to be able to say, here is a mayor that took us upstream. He did not wait for crises to happen. He prevented them from happening. Because when you allow people to fall in the river, not everyone makes it downstream. Some people drown on the way down. We have to rethink how we run cities in New York and across America. And I want to create an environment where we are preventing the crises that we face every day. But I'm also going to be the only mayor that will have a deputy mayor of youth engagement, a person that will report directly to me. He or she would be between the ages of 21 to 29. And their role is to look at the city through the eyes of young people. I'm not 18, I'm not 21, I'm 60. I cannot define your reality for you. You must define it for yourselves. I remember when I was 18 years old and my girlfriend broke my heart. My dad said, son, that's just puppy love. And I said, well, Dad, you know what? It hurts just as much as a grown dog love. It still hurts. And so I want to have you define what the city should look like and have someone that is youthful, a young person, to help me shape the city into what young people need in the city, not for me to dictate it to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Adams. Just one more question. Oh, apparently we don't have time.
Do your last question. Go ahead.
All right. So I think from a lot of us organizing this forum, we're all extremely interested in politics, and we all basically want to be where you are someday, you know, really impacting our community, serving in various posts. What advice do you have to the next generation from how to get from where you are, a young kid born in Queens, to borough president of Brooklyn?
I love that. Great question. Let me tell you something. There's nothing special about me. I was a D student throughout high school. I didn't get my first A until I went to college. I went to school at night, 2 classes at a time. My son was born, I went down to 1. I've always struggled. I did not learn until later in life that I had a learning disability. And it wasn't until someone told me that I had to look and do my own research. But I persevered. Don't judge yourself on being brilliant. Judge yourself on being endurance. Push through. People didn't believe in me, but you know what? I believed in myself. Believe in yourselves. And all of you are lions. And lions don't care about the opinions of sheep. They rule. And that is my advice to you. You are leaders, not of tomorrow. You're leaders of today. And there are going to be some difficult moments. Trust me. I found myself in dark places. But you make the decision if that dark place is a burial or a planting. And if it's a planting, make sure the fruits of your harvest go to feed people who are also in dark places. That is how we do this. And lean into the discomfort of learning something new. This is a beautiful mosaic of young people who are on. Don't only know people who look like you, talk like you, eat the same food, do the same thing, and think the same way. Meet new friends and new groups and organizations and be a part of them. That is how you're going to really change this entire country. The winds of change are not blown by adults. The winds of change have always been blown by young people. So I say to you, take a deep breath and blow this globe in the direction that you want it to go into. And not only would you be a mayor, but you'll be a maker of people.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Appreciate you.
So I think now we will begin with closing remarks. Candidate Scott Stringer is supposed to join us, but until he does, I think we have a lot of people to thank, and I will pass it over to Eitan.
Okay, let's see one more minute to see if Mr. Stringer decides to join us. If not, I'm gonna close it out right here. Let's see. Okay, so with that, we are going to thank Mr. Eric Adams, Mr. Ray Mcguire, Mr. Art Chang, Mr. Andrew Yang, wait, Scott's here? Oh, I think we have Scott. Mr. Stringer, can you hear us?
He's here.
Hello.
Hello.
Just in time.
Tom, I'm not getting volume.
Oh, can you hear me?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Mr. Stringer, can you hear me? Nope, I think that's Mr. Stringer's problem.
Dr. Schwartz, should we put questions in the chat?
Mr. Stringer is currently not here, so.
Yeah, I think he's trying to try to fix it. Sorry for the technical delays.
The wonders of live events. Sometimes exciting things like this happen.
Let's try this again, everybody.
Can you hear us now?
Yes, hello, how are you?
Fantastic.
Perfect. All right, so we are happy to introduce our next candidate, Mr. Scott Stringer. Mr. Stringer has been involved in New York City politics for over 3 decades. He has served as state assembly member, borough president of Manhattan, and most recently as comptroller of the city of New York. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Stringer.
It's great to be here with all of you.
I believe our first question comes from Tijan. So Tijan, take it away.
Hello,
Hi.
my name is Tijan, and I'm a sophomore at Rosley School, which is an Islamic school in Queens. Students who will be starting high school this year will be eligible to vote when you run for re-election. Where do you want the city to be when they graduate from high school? How should New Yorkers look back in 2025? Looking back in 2025, evaluate the success of your first term, and how will you, if elected as the next mayor of New York City, listen to and advocate for all NYC's young people, including those from communities which are sometimes overlooked?
Well, first of all, thank you for giving me this opportunity to be with all of you. Before I answer the question, the way I started my political career was I was appointed at the age of 16 to my local community board and had the opportunity to do so much work, both in my Washington Heights community and beyond. And it's really great to see the next generation of activists who are here today. Look, for me, I know that so many New Yorkers, including yourselves, were knocked down during this pandemic, especially young people in high school who had a track to college and beyond. Suddenly a virus came and everyone went into lockdown. And it's a testament to all of you that you are true New Yorkers. When they knock you down, you get back up. And that is what being a New Yorker is all about. I want to be the next mayor because I think that this is the moment that we have to transform our city. We don't have to open the economy like we closed it. We can make sure that every young person in this city has an opportunity to college and beyond, to have careers in a city that will welcome people of all different backgrounds, all different races. A mayor needs to have experience, leadership, and also a vision for the city. We cannot keep our young people in the city if it's going to cost $2 million to rent a condo or buy a condo apartment. We need affordable housing. We need quality education. And we need a plan also for your parents to continue, especially the frontline parents, to continue to have opportunity in the city. Now, for some of you, I mean, I'm an older dad. I got married at an older age, and I have a 9-year-old and 7-year-old. And just like I worry about all of you, I'm worried about my 3rd grader and my 2nd grader. I want to make sure that they're going to get the mental health services they need going back to school. I want to make sure that there are more guidance counselors and social workers. This pandemic has really impacted us. And when I look back on this mayoralty, it's the same way I look back on being controller. What can we do, not just to build our city, but to also protect our planet? And I'm proud to tell all of you that as controller, I just finished the largest fossil fuel divestment in the history of this city and in this country, $4 billion, because we have to think about how this planet is going to be for you and the children that you will have in the coming years.
Next up, I think we're going to have a question from Yona.
Hi, apropos that last point, my name is Jonas Sperling-Muller, and I'm the captain of the Environmental Club at SAR High School in the Bronx. As a coastal city, New York is at an especially high risk for the effects of climate change, and many projections predict that rising sea levels could leave parts of New York City underwater by the end of the century. Your campaign has embraced the upper limits of climate policy, but many proposals would drastically change how New Yorkers commute, shop, and live. For example, you support banning cars from large swaths of the city and eliminating gas hookups in new construction. If elected, how do you intend to get New Yorkers on board with these lifestyle changes? And how will you make sure New York feels livable both now and in the future?
Well, climate change is one of the greatest challenges facing our city and facing the whole planet. And I have dedicated a lot of my work to resiliency. You know, the mayor has a resiliency for Lower Manhattan, a resiliency plan, and that's fine, but there's 520 miles of shoreline. We need to have a plan for the entire city. It may shock you to know that FEMA money, 50% of the FEMA money from the federal government after Hurricane Sandy remains unspent, even though we can know for sure that the next big storm is not 250 years from now, but could be as early as 8 years or 10 years from now. And the next mayor must have the political experience and the vision to put in place a climate plan that meets the resiliency challenges. But we are at a moment now where we have to think about climate from the perspective of the green economy, whether it's the green economy at public housing or retrofitting our luxury buildings. This is an economy that I believe will be larger than the Industrial Revolution. $30 billion economic investment in our city, not just to protect our city, but to actually put people to work again. And that all comes from the green economy and climate change. The fact is, we are so slow that now the cost of inaction is becoming far greater than the cost of action. So we need to invest economically. What I was able to do as controller was not just divest from fossil fuel, but we also doubled our investment in the green economy. My goal as mayor is to put a solar panel on every roof and an electric battery in every basement and begin the transformation to a green.
It appears we lost Mr. Stringer. Mr. Stringer, can you hear us?
He has disconnected.
Okay.
Let's wait one moment and see if he returns. If not,
we'll go to close. Yep.
He's back.
Did you miss me?
Mr. Stringer, can you hear us now?
Yes, I think that was God's way of saying, stop talking.
Tyler, I think we have one more.
We do have one more, and I believe it comes from Amira. Amira, go ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Amira Ismail. I'm Muslim and a freshman at Razi School, which is located in Queens. Across the city, minority and religious groups are fearful of a rise in hate crimes and targeting visible minorities. Recently, multiple synagogues were vandalized and mosques have been vandalized and broken down due to hatred, leading many residents to be afraid that they could be targeted. How can you assure people of faith or other minorities that are so often targeted that the perpetrators of these horrific acts will be held accountable given the varying views on bail laws and policing for different groups of people attending tonight?
Well, first of all, the fact that all of you of different backgrounds are here together is a testament to what adults should understand is your resilience. That by staying together as a city, when one group is attacked, another group comes to aid and protest and calls out this horrible, vile hate. We've seen hate in the Jewish community. We've seen hate in the Muslim community. We've seen too much hate over the many years. But I believe that the next mayor has to protect the people. And I pledge to make sure that we up the clearance rates. In other words, finding the people who are causing the hate crime, making sure that they know that we are going to enforce the law fully, because hate is so hurtful, not just as a crime, but it's a way of life. We see this on the political stage nationally. And as mayor, I'm going to do everything that I can to reduce that. But the way to do it is enforcement, but it's also community planning and how we bring everyone together. Right now, in addition to anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim hate, we're now seeing an uptick in anti-Asian hate. And we need a strategy that goes into communities. Part of it is education. Part of it is investing in mental health initiatives, because some of the people causing the hate are acting out. But it's not so much about bail, because bail is just for people to be held to a court appearance. The real strategy is an education strategy, a community safety plan, and a police presence. And the next mayor has to coordinate all three at the same time.
And with that, we thank Mr. Scott Stringer for joining us tonight.
Thank you, everybody.
I think,
congratulations.
Thank you for coming. And we also would like to thank Mr. Andrew Yang, who joined us as well, and Mr. Ray Mcguire, Mrs. Kathryn Garcia, Mr. Eric Adams, and Mr. Art Chang, who all joined us tonight. And we cannot have put this event all together without the help of so many individuals who have helped us along the way, including Minister Onleilove Alston, Dr. Laura Shaw Frank, Dr. Ari Gordon, Rabbi Bloom from the tech department, Josh Lewis from the tech department, Lauren Katz from the SAR, Dr. Rivka Schwartz, who has been our faculty advisor and assisted us along the way, Mr. Petrus Fortune from Bishop Laughlin High School, Mr. Dan Lanahan from St. John Baptiste High School, and we also want to thank Ms. Zainab Khan from the Muslim American Leadership Alliance, as well as Dr. Mehnaz Afridi from the Holocaust Genocide Interfaith Education Center at Manhattan College. And there have been so many people who have helped us with this event that I'm probably leaving out people. So I apologize for that. And we really appreciate everyone who turned out for this event. We will have the recording up on YouTube, which can be shared and viewed again. And we hope that this event, as we as students put our differences aside and came together for one goal, and to hear from the people who could be the next mayor of New York City, what their visions are and how that affects our communities. Because we do, as communities, have so much in common. Even though sometimes we think we have so many differences, we have a lot in common, and that's what's important. And it's important to come together and build bridges between our different communities in order to do that. So we hope that everyone enjoyed the evening and was able to learn something about which candidate they might want to support, or for their communities or their families. And we really thank everyone for being here. And who knows, maybe we'll have some more events like this.